Hello, I'm Robert Mello. I am a Georgia actor and a Georgia acting teacher.
Hi, I'm John Babcock. You're watching Georgia Actors. I'm here with Robert Mello. Robert, thank you so much for being with us today. First of all, what inspired you to be an actor?
Wow, what a terrific question. I think when I realized I didn't want to be a priest and that I had wanted to be a priest because I wanted to perform in front of people, which I figured out because I also thought I wanted to be a lawyer.
Oh.
And I did the math on that and I was like, oh, I just want to be in front of people. So I went and signed up for drama in 11th grade.
Was there anyone in particular that inspired you to be on stage, be an actor?
I had one of those classic, wonderful high school drama teachers who had a sense that my home life was probably not as Leave It to Beaver as it could be. And sensed, I always had this feeling she sensed I needed a place to hang out. And so she was always very encouraging and always encouraged me to continue to audition and to show up and to try to get into what was called play production until I got in. So she was my first champion. And then this woman I met who was choreographing one of the shows was a dancer who also helped me with my acting. She was like a real actor. It's all very The Graduate. That's why I paused there. Should I go down this road?
You don't. It's
Public broadcasting.
right. You don't have to go down that road. No, but when you decided you did want to be an actor, what were your next steps? Did you take outside acting classes outside of college?
I took one acting class. My father said, hey, there's this acting class. Do you want to go to it? And I said, sure. And I tried it. And no offense to any technique, but I was probably 16 and I was sort of rolling my eyes at this acting class because we were laying on the floor screaming and saying stuff to our parents that we've always wanted to say and all of this stuff. And as a cynical 15-year-old, I was like, what is this? What does this have to do with acting? So I dropped out of that. And then oddly enough, so I did a bunch of stuff in high school and community theater stuff. And then I decided to be a professional dancer, despite being completely not athletic. Mm-hmm. I'm not even convinced I have rhythm. And I went and somehow got a scholarship from a very well-known dance teacher in LA. And then that started like a 12-year journey in dance, which then led me to Chicago. And that's where I got serious again about my acting.
And were you able to apply your dance skills to your acting skills?
Absolutely. I mean, it wasn't why. Basically, my body, I was just getting too old and crotchety to dance anymore. And
right.
Plus, I was never very good, if I'm honest with myself. And so I had just gone through this terrible breakup, and the woman I had broken up with, her best friend was like, I think you'd be good at improv. And so I went and studied improv at what was then known as the Improv Olympic, and I got to work with people like Del Close and Adam McKay and John Favreau and Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, all these people that went on to far greater success than I did. But that opened me back up to acting, and I just started acting, and I just started auditioning because I was a great faker. People would hire me for reasons I don't understand, and without any real training other than high school training. Mm-hmm. And then I started getting frustrated, and I was thinking about quitting, and a friend said, why don't you go try this school? I think it would flip some switches for you. Because I didn't feel satisfied as an actor. I just felt like I was remembering lines and just saying them, and I was writing more and directing more and feeling really incredibly creative that way. I didn't feel creative acting, so I was going to give up acting. And then a friend turned me on to the woman who would be my most influential teacher, a woman named Kathy Scambiatera in Chicago, and I studied with her, and she did flip a lot of switches that made me understand the art that acting is and how creative it could actually be. Mm-hmm. So about 2 years after studying, I started teaching alongside my teacher, who taught me how to teach. Let me know if you want me to use the word teach or teacher one more time.
I think we got it both covered. We got samples of both there.
So I started teaching while working as a creative executive for a production company, and I got to do that for 3 or 4 years and learn a lot about what happens behind the scenes and the casting process and all that fun stuff. So I really didn't start really acting again until several years later, when that contract ended. A friend of mine lived here, and she's like, Atlanta needs an acting teacher, an acting school. So I had been out here a few times to try to get money for now a feature that I was trying to produce, which eventually got made, called Copy Kill Boss. You can watch it on YouTube. Please rent it. Someday I'll see $1. So I ended up coming here, and that was 10 years ago now. And then that's when I started acting again. And even that was happenstance. So a guy named Grant McGowan, who has a wonderful theater company, Pinch and Ouch Theater, he said, why don't you do Speed the Plow? And I was like, all right. And I hadn't done anything in 5 years, probably. And so I did the play, and the folks who are still my agents happened to come and see it. And they were like, why don't we represent you? And I was like, that's not really where my focus is. I just want to teach mostly. And then they said, well, how about you can work it around your schedule. You can turn down anything you don't want. And I said, all right. And I was like, so that's really how I started getting really back into it.
Now, do you notice a big difference acting on stage versus acting on camera and your approach to it?
For a long time, I was not a big on-camera fan. I actually thought it was a whole industry that happened with the creation of affordable video equipment. And so now that there is this whole thing where you could pay a lot of money to take on-camera classes, right? And I felt that there was way too much emphasis on auditioning and on camera and not enough emphasis on just acting. I've softened that a little bit. I teach a lot more on camera in my intensives, and I get coaching for on camera. And so I understand probably the technical differences more than I used to, but I will still argue it's not that much different at the end of the day.
Yeah.
I think auditioning is acting. And I always say I had one on-camera class, which was when I was doing I think it was a grad film or some indie film in Chicago, and it was the first time I had done anything on film, and we did the first shot, and the director peeked out from behind the camera and went like this to me. And I went, oh, okay, I'll be smaller. And that was my on-camera class. So no denigration to it. I think it is definitely a skill. I think there's definitely a set of skills. And what I've also learned is that a lot of people like me right now are super uncomfortable on camera, right? So and so they just need the practice just being on camera and just getting used to this sort of thing staring at you. I think the technical aspects are pretty easy to learn and master in a lot of ways. But my argument's always like, look, I doubt Marlon Brando took an on-camera class. I think some of our greatest actors.
Right.
I don't think Meryl Streep took an on-camera class.
It was just an acting class.
Yeah, she took acting, and then she adjusted appropriately. To me, at the end of the day, auditioning's acting, and you have to master the acting part. And the camera stuff, I think you can learn, most people can learn pretty quickly. Unless you've had a lot of, now, I'm gonna get in trouble, unless you've had a lot of really bad theater training. Unless you've had that teacher who insists that you do everything like apparently Katharine Hepburn.
Right.
Do it really big and because I also don't think theater acting is as big as people think it is. Especially with so much of the miking that's being done. The performances on stage are not as big as a lot of people, I think, misguidingly think. And plus part of it was also I think part of my ease of moving into on camera was that I did a ton of Chicago storefront theater where we were 4 feet away, 5 feet away, 10 feet away from the audience. So the performances were always sort of calibrated to that. We didn't have to. We weren't trying to hit the back row. I hope some of this makes sense.
It does. Yeah, it absolutely does. And of course, you teach the Meisner technique.
I teach a Meisner-based technique. I call it
okay.
Meisner-based out of respect for Mr. Meisner, because he himself said that he was the only person who could teach Meisner. We all have our nuances. We all have things that we discover about it. There's a variety of variations on the technique. out there. And so I felt about 5 years ago, I felt necessary to be really honest and go, look, I teach a Meisner-based technique.
And just so everybody's up to speed, what is Meisner's approach to acting?
So Meisner is defined acting as living truthfully under given imaginary circumstances, right? He doesn't define it as acting. He doesn't define it as performing. He defines it at this really base level of you living truthfully under the imaginary circumstances. And he believed, as do I, that the best thing you can bring to your work is yourself. He did not believe in some of the tools of more classical method acting where you have memories to bring forth emotional responses. He felt that prevented a really vital connection between the two actors in the scene, because I'm off thinking about my dead cat, trying to get some tears going, and so I'm just sort of shark-eyed. I'm exaggerating. Don't get offended if you're Strasbourg-based or the other techniques, but that's why he started it. He thought that the vital connection was lost when people really went off into their heads in order to generate an emotional response. So he really wanted to move acting out of people's head and into their guts, and he wanted people to rely much more on their imagination. He believed that the imagination was just as powerful as your past and a lot healthier, because who wants to go through, their cat's death for 30 takes?
And that connected, that technique versus the others connected with you more
Yeah,
than-
something about it, the minute I did it, it clicked and made a lot of sense for me. I'm not going to say it came without effort, but my understanding of what I was working towards came pretty easily. I definitely had gigantic struggles, but I understood pretty quickly what we were aiming for. I think it's like ballet. I think that's one of the reasons also that the Meisner technique spoke to me, is that it's very, it has a very clear path. You learn this set of skills first, and you practice like a dog with those. Then you add this set of skills on top of that, and you practice like a dog, and then you learn this set of skills, and then maybe here you start getting into actual script work. So Meisner's that rare acting teacher where you learn and practice a bunch of skills and a bunch of tools before you actually start just like diving into a script. He felt that for me to hand a beginning actor script would be like if I handed someone who's never played football a football playbook, and go, all right, get out there. Or a beginning violinist, a concerto. He was like, no, first you play scales. And that really spoke to me as a dancer who was like, first you stand at the ballet bar and you point your toe 5 million times and you kick 5,000 times, right? That all really fed into the way Meisner taught, that fed into that dance background that I had.
Tell me a little bit about how it's important for an actor to continue, learning and taking classes regardless of how old they are or how long they've been doing it.
I think as people change, right, we're constantly changing. I am not the person I was 10 years ago. I'm not the person I was 5 years ago, right? And so as we grow, as we change, as we become quite different, I think we need to continuously sort of work on the things that can bring who we are today to our work. We need to continually sort of revisit the tools or add new tools. I'm very much, as was Mr. Meisner, he said, at the end of the day, you're making your own acting technique. He's like, I'm going to give you this bunch of these tools. I'm going to give you a bunch of stuff that I think makes really great actors. But at the end of the day, you're going to go, this works for me and this works for me. Then I'm going to add this other thing from over here because that really works for me. And you're going to have your own technique because we're all so unique. We are all such individuals. To think that one method is going to be the method is perhaps foolish.
And it seems in addition to the skill, you're also expanding your community and networking.
100%. 100%. That's one of the things I love about teaching, and sort of community has always been important to me, like having some sense of community. Yes, class leads to other opportunities. I think that's also why I tell people, like, at a certain point, especially when you're beginning, take anything, because it's every show I did, even if I was like, I don't know if I want to do this, right, led to something else better. led to a connection with someone who I might still know and still work with, right? So I always encourage people, like, do whatever at the beginning. Don't be picky. Just get out there and act and meet people, because it always leads to something.
And since there's been such growth in Georgia in acting, have you noticed an uptick in classes? Things of that nature?
Yeah. I mean, the growth in Atlanta has been gigantic in the last 10 years, and the growth for sort of, no insult to anyone, but sort of more serious-minded classes has been extensive. You know, when I first got here, I sort of had to sell the idea of learning a technique. Don't get me wrong, there were a couple places that were teaching technique, but then there were a lot of places that were just teaching auditioning, on-camera auditioning. And so a lot of folks didn't quite understand that, oh, you can learn this technique and you can work really hard at it and build this foundation to your work before you start learning how to audition or being in front of a camera. And very quickly, it became clear that a lot of people were hungry for that. You know, Atlanta's been great to me. I've been super lucky. I've never hurt for students, right? And I hope that always continues. So it's definitely, I get a lot more calls now from LA actors. So many LA folks have moved here, and a certain amount of New York people are also showing up here because it's become the hub where it's a little easier to get your foot in the door here. I think 5 years ago it was a lot easier. I think it just gets harder literally every day. There was a time when I could call a few agents in town and go, I got this person. They go like, great. And now it's like, well, how many network credits do they have, right? So it's definitely gotten a lot tougher and is probably, I don't think it's nearly as hard as LA still, but I think it's 10 times harder to move forward in the industry here.
Is that where you think that people creating their own opportunities then comes in and helps?
100%. Yeah. I'm working on stuff for myself, you know. I'm working on a web series I wrote, and I'm trying to create some stuff for myself as well that I know I would do really well. I work now and then. I would like to work more, but I think I'm developing this project that I feel really shows my strengths. Creating your own opportunities by producing your own short films or your own YouTube stuff. I know a couple folks here who produced like a small little short film, and now they're doing features, and now they're starting to get national attention with their work. So I am definitely a super fan of create your own opportunity. For me, it started with a need to satiate some sort of performance need that I think a lot of actors have. But as I've gotten, you know, now that I'm over 40, it's it grows. It's only become more meaningful and less about performing. That's something I try to impart to my students. I mean, we saw it in the pandemic that people relied on actors so much for some peace of mind, right? To escape into storytelling and to find some enjoyment in life, you know, locked up in their home watching 33 episodes of Schitt's Creek, which was something I did as well, right? And I think it's especially become really apparent how important acting is. Or maybe it's become that to me, but it's something that I try to impart to my students. Like, I really think a friend of mine, a very close friend of mine who sometimes teaches for me, he says, acting saves lives. And I think that's true. I think that's really true. And I think actors deserve the respect that doctors get. I think we work really hard to provide something for people through storytelling.
Robert, any final thoughts on being a working actor in Georgia?
Red wine, a lot of red wine. No, I think so many cliches are true. I've realized in life, like you really do have to enjoy the journey, or else you're gonna quit. You really do have to understand that auditioning is acting, and that if you love acting so much, then you really should love auditioning, right? It shouldn't be this stupid thing you have to get out of the way. It should be like a painter going into their studio to paint, or a writer sitting down at the typewriter. And it might be this semi-torturous thing, but it's ultimately something that brings you great joy and sort of feeds your soul. So I think something that a lot of actors miss today, and I did this for a while, is that you consider auditioning this other thing instead of, no, auditioning is acting. You have to remember that, and you really do have to embrace that idea that the journey is the thing, because it can be a really long journey. You know, I have students that I trained 20 years ago who are having success now. I think you have to really ask yourself why you want to do this, and is this what you want to do? And I think if you can answer those questions, and it involves actually loving acting and maybe realizing that you can contribute something to the world, and that makes it worth it, then you'll last. I think you really have to remember to not give up. I mean, it's as simple as that. The longer you go, the more you keep studying, the more you can let go of every audition, so that you don't stress over every audition and sit there waiting for the phone call. The more you can do your best and turn it in and move on with your life, I think the better chance you'll have at success. I think a lot of stuff that we emphasize on success, I know a lot of people who've never followed them. I think we get obsessed with thinking about what font is on our resume, instead of do I really love this? Do I have the chutzpah to stick it out? It's like Mark Manson, he wrote that book, Subtle Art of Not Giving a Fuck. I think he asks a great question, which is basically, how many shit sandwiches are you willing to eat? Because you got to be willing to eat a lot of shit sandwiches in acting. You got to be willing and ready to do that and still be okay, and still be yeah, this is part of the gig that I got to just keep climbing. So I think you have to, I think you just don't give up. I think you just keep going, and you have to, the cliche is true, you 100% have to enjoy the journey, or you're going to stop. That's a good one.
That's a
pretty good one.
Yeah. We'll end there. Thank you, Robert.
I can tell you a gig that went wrong when I was a dancer, and the fog machine spewed oil all over the stage, and we just kept going. We went for a while, and then we just gave up and walked off with our heads held low.
Were you slipping? I mean,
yeah.
Ooh.
It turned into an oil slick on stage. So that was a pretty bad gig. I did a commercial for insurance in Chicago with a guy who thought, he got confused and thought we were doing Chekhov. And he was reading the Meisner book on set.
And you said, give me that.
And he would whisper in my ear, there's one shot where I'm looking at like a baby or something in a hospital thing or something, and then he came up behind me and he was like, that's your son, go. It's like, this is an insurance commercial. Can we just